Imagine this, a city that had been the most powerful in the Christian world for 1,000 years, with walls no army had ever breached in 10 centuries, with majestic monuments, with riches the rest of Europe couldn't even imagine. And in just 1 month, all of that would change forever. That's exactly what happened in the 15th century in the city we now know as Istanbul. And what happened here didn't just change a city. It changed the course of history entirely. That's Istanbul in the 15th century. To truly understand it, we need to start with what the city was like before that century. Because in the year 1400, the city was still called Constantinople, and it was technically still the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the direct successor to the Eastern Roman Empire. But by the year 1400, the Byzantine Empire was a shadow of its former self. We're talking about an empire that actually controlled little more than the city itself and some scattered territories. The Ottomans had already surrounded them on all sides. Constantinople was basically a Christian island in an Ottoman sea. And who were the Ottomans? Just so everyone's clear, the Ottomans were a people of Turkish origin and Muslim faith who had been expanding from Central Asia since the late 13th century. In just 150 years, they had built a huge empire controlling almost all of Anatolia, which is the Asian part of modern-day Turkey, and a large part of the Balkans. They were the dominant power in the region, ruled by a sultan, and Constantinople, the great Christian city, was the only thing they lacked to have it all. The Emperor of Constantinople at that time was Manuel II Palaiologos, and this man knew perfectly well he was in a desperate situation. So much so that between 1399 and 1403, he went on a tour of Europe, literally begging the kings of France, England, Castile, and Aragon for help. He visited Paris, London, and traveled all over the Iberian Peninsula, and the response he got was basically, "We understand, but we can't do anything." No one wanted to send troops to save Constantinople. Inside the walls, the city remained architecturally impressive. Hagia Sophia still stood, the largest church in the Christian world for almost 1,000 years, built in the 6th century. The Hippodrome, where chariot races were held until a couple of centuries ago, still stood. The walls of Theodosius II, built in the 5th century, were a marvel of military engineering. 3 lines of walls, moats, towers. No one had been able to breach them since their construction. But the city was half empty. At its peak, Constantinople had reached between 500,000 and 800,000 inhabitants. In the 15th century, the population was around 50,000 people, a significant decline. Sultan Mehmed II was born in 1432 and first ascended the Ottoman throne in 1444 at just 12 years old. He was deposed but returned to the throne in 1451 at age 19, and from the very first day he returned to power, he made it clear what his objective was: taking Constantinople. This was not a new ambition for the Ottomans. Several previous sultans had tried. But Mehmed was different because he was much more systematic and prepared. The first thing he did in 1452, a year before the siege, was to build the Rumeli Hisari fortress. He ordered it built at the narrowest point of the Bosphorus in just 4 months. This allowed him to control maritime traffic through the strait and cut off any aid that might reach Constantinople by sea. But Mehmed's great trump card was artillery. He hired a Hungarian engineer who had first tried to sell his services to the Byzantine Emperor Constantine XI, but he couldn't afford him. Mehmed could, and he built several enormous cannons, the largest capable of launching stone projectiles of about 500 kilos over a kilometer away. Nothing like this had ever been seen before in a siege operation. The Ottoman army that appeared before Constantinople in the spring of 1453 numbered between 60,000 and 80,000 soldiers, according to sources. On the other side, Emperor Constantine XI had about 7,000 defenders, including Genoese mercenaries led by Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, who was undoubtedly the best military defender of the city. The siege began on April 6, 1453, and for weeks the defenders held on incredibly. Urban's great cannons breached the walls during the day, but the defenders repaired them at night, again and again, for weeks. It was a brutal attrition for both sides. Mehmed also tried to attack by sea, but the Byzantines had closed off the Golden Horn, the natural estuary protecting the city from the north, with a huge iron chain that prevented ships from passing. The Ottoman ships couldn't enter, and here comes one of the most incredible moments of the entire century. Mehmed ordered his ships to be transported by land. Literally, he had a path of greased logs built over the hill behind the Golden Horn, and on a single night, April 22, 1453, he transported between 70 and 80 ships overland, over a hill several hundred meters high, to lower them into the Golden Horn on the other side. At dawn, the city's defenders found the Ottoman fleet inside the estuary they thought was safe, an operation of unprecedented logistics. Despite all this, the defenders continued to resist. But on May 22nd, bad news arrived. A lunar eclipse occurred. In those times, eclipses were considered signs from heaven, and an ancient prophecy said Constantinople would fall when the full moon waned. The eclipse further crushed the defenders' morale. The final assault came in the early morning of May 29, 1453. Mehmed launched 3 waves of attack. The first 2 were repelled, but in the third, something decisive happened. Giovanni Giustiniani, the best defending general, received a serious wound and had to leave the wall. His retreat demoralized the troops at the most critical point of the wall. The Ottomans also found a small secondary gate, the Kirkaporta, which had been left open or insufficiently guarded. They entered through it, and once inside the walls, their fate was sealed. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos died that day. He did not flee. According to all sources, he tore off his imperial insignia to avoid identification and threw himself into battle alongside his soldiers. His body was never definitively identified, a truly epic end for the last Roman emperor. The city fell on May 29, 1453. It had stood for 1123 years as the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. On that day, that empire ceased to exist. Mehmed II entered the city that same day, and the first thing he did was head to Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia had been the largest Christian cathedral in the world for almost 1,000 years. It was built between 532 and 537 by Emperor Justinian. The Sultan entered, prayed there, and ordered it converted into a mosque. The Christian mosaics and icons were covered with plaster or lime, though many were preserved intact underneath. Mehmed, who was a cultured man and spoke several languages including Greek, decided he didn't want a devastated city. He wanted a great imperial capital, so he took several immediate measures. He spared the lives of thousands of inhabitants, allowed Greeks and other communities to continue living in the city, guaranteed religious freedom to the Orthodox Patriarch and the Christian community, and actively began to repopulate the city, bringing people from various parts of the empire. In the years following 1453, Mehmed transformed the city with astonishing speed. In 1455, he ordered the construction of the Grand Bazaar, the Kapala Charsha. Today, it is one of the largest covered markets in the world, with over 60 internal streets and 4,000 shops. It started as a small wooden structure but grew rapidly. Between 1459 and 1465, the Topkapi Palace was built, which would be the heart of the Ottoman Empire for almost 400 years. Situated at the tip of the peninsula, where the Bosphorus, the Sea of Marmara, and the Golden Horn converge. Topkapi was not so much a palace in the European sense, but a city within a city, with courtyards, pavilions, gardens, libraries, imperial kitchens, the imperial harem, and the throne room. From here, the Ottoman Empire was ruled by sultans until the 19th century. Mehmed also built the Fatih Mosque, the Conquerors. Between 1463 and 1470, on the site where the Church of the Holy Apostles once stood, the second most important church in Byzantium after Hagia Sophia, and which was demolished to build the new mosque. Alongside it, he created a complex that included 8 madrasas, a library, a hospital, and a market. It was the first major Ottoman religious complex in the city. But the consequences of what happened in Constantinople in 1453 didn't stay in the city alone. They spread throughout the known world. First, the intellectual impact. When Constantinople fell, Thousands of Greek scholars fled to Italy, primarily to Florence, Venice, and Rome, and they took with them ancient Greek manuscripts that were barely known in Western Europe. Texts by Plato, Aristotle, Archimedes, physicians, mathematicians, philosophers. This injected enormous fuel into the Italian Renaissance that was already underway. Renaissance humanism received a direct boost from the refugees of Constantinople. Second, the commercial impact. With the Ottomans controlling Constantinople and the entire land route between Europe and Asia, trade with the East became exceedingly expensive. The silk and spice routes that passed through that area fell under Ottoman control. This drove the European commercial powers to despair, and they began to seek alternative sea routes. Portugal had already spent years exploring the African coast. Spain financed Columbus in 1492. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 is one of the factors that directly accelerated the age of discovery. Without 1453, perhaps America would not have been discovered when it was. Third, the geopolitical impact. Istanbul, as Mehmed II renamed it, became the capital of the most powerful empire in the world. In the second half of the 15th century and throughout the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire was the dominant superpower, and the heart of all that power was the city we now call Istanbul. Mehmed II died in 1481, at only 49 years old. He was succeeded by his son Bayezid II, and the 15th century ended with a city that had gone from being a dying Christian capital to becoming the most dynamic metropolis in the world. In 1492, the same year Columbus reached America, the Catholic monarchs expelled the Jews from Spain. Sultan Bayezid II offered them refuge in the Ottoman Empire. Thousands of Sephardic Jews settled in Istanbul and other Ottoman cities, enriching the city with their culture, their medical knowledge, their experience in trade, and their traditions. Istanbul thus became a city of coexistence for Greeks, Turks, Armenians, Jews, Genoese, and people from dozens of different origins. By the end of the 15th century, the city had grown from 50,000 inhabitants to over 200,000. It was the most populous city in Europe. It had grown faster than any other city in the world. In just 100 years, this city went from being the dying remains of a millennial empire to becoming the capital of the world. It changed its name, its religion, its ruler, its official language, its dominant culture, and in doing so, it unleashed a chain of consequences that reached America, the Italian Renaissance, and the books we read today. I'm Max. Thanks for traveling to the past with me. To understand what we see today, and now tell me in the comments, what city, place, or historical moment would you like to see reconstructed? See you in the next era.